Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar, Professor of English, University of Kerala. Today we will discuss the poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Thomas Stearns Eliot, popularly known as T.S. Eliot, is one of the most famous poets of the 20th century. He spearheaded the modernist movement with his poem The Wasteland. Modernism has revolutionized writing in the early part of the 20th century with its novel style and a new way of looking at things, both in the field of poetry as well as novel. We find a lot of new writers emerging and revolutionary, path-breaking works challenging the traditional forms of writing. T.S. Eliot was a multifaceted genius. He was not only a poet, he was a critic as well as a dramatist. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948. It is true that Eliot transformed literature not only in English but in other parts of the world, and we find the waves of change in different literatures all over the world. His major works are The Wasteland, The Hollow Men, Ash Wednesday, Four Quarters, and this particular poem, A Love Song of Alfred J. Prufrock, is considered to be one of the important poems by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot followed his own subjective view about the world. As far as poetry is concerned, we find Eliot challenging the poets who came before him. It was Eliot who reintroduced metaphysical poetry and tried to follow the kind of intellectual and concise poetry written by metaphysicals. Now let us come to the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The original title of the poem was Prufrock Among the Women, but it was changed to The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The name Prufrock was taken from an advertisement of William Prufrock Furniture Company, which was a business enterprise, and the initial J is actually an invented thing. And the term love song was from Rudyard Kipling's poem The Love Song of Har Dyal, published in Plain Tales from Hills. The term Prufrock has an anti-romantic suggestion in it, and that may be why he selected that name for his central character in the poem, because Prufrock is a person who failed in everything in life. More than that, the poem is a kind of a dramatic monologue. It is a narrative poem in which one person narrates his own experiences, his own story. A dramatic monologue is a poem which presents one's own experience. At the same time, the narrator, while narrating the story, should suggest the presence of a listener as well. Eliot uses the dramatic monologue for this poem mainly because he wanted to give the reader a clear picture of the character. It is a kind of a character study that we find in the poem. Here, Prufrock presents his inner feelings and throws light on his own inner consciousness. From the narration, the listeners will be able to derive their own opinion about the speaker. So the dramatic monologue here becomes a technique for unraveling the inner experiences of the narrator. The poem Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was published in the Poetry magazine in 1950. But it was written a few years back, and it was because of the persuasion of Ezra Pound that he published it. The poem begins with an epigraph taken from the Inferno. It comprises of 6 lines said by Guido da Montefeltro, a character in the 8th circle of the hell. The epigraph refers to Dante's conversation with Guido, who says that Guido would not have told his story to Dante if he had the opportunity to escape from hell. Now let us come to the poem proper. The poem Alfred J. Prufrock describes a typical modern man in the early 1900s. He was troubled by questions of his own identity in the society. He feels that he is a failure and a misfit in the society. He is a representative of an urban man filled with feelings of isolation, fear, and a kind of inferiority complex. He is not able to take decisions in his life and feels that he has failed in everything. In the poem, the speaker, Prufrock, appears to be addressing a potential lover. He speaks about his experience as a lover, and he says that he is attacked with a feeling of fear, and this fear prevents him from entering into love relationships. At this point, Eliot makes Prufrock's mind to meander to a series of fairly concrete physical settings, like the cityscape, to the several interiors at the social gathering, like the women's arms in the lamplight, fireplaces, coffee spoon. Again, Prufrock's mind travels and shows a series of vague ocean images, which explains the speaker's emotional distance from the world. He feels that this world is looking down upon him as a second-rate status described in the words, "I am not Prince Hamlet." The line, "I have measured out my life in coffee spoons," actually a reference to the condition of Prufrock, who is as insignificant as a coffee spoon. Actually, Prufrock is a representative of a modern man who has lost confidence and who feels that his existence is not at all relevant in the modern society. He is frustrated by all kinds of unhappy experiences of life, and the monologue effectively presents his frustrations and disillusionments. When we look at the poem, what we find is that it presents the insecurity experienced by Prufrock, and we find that Prufrock is unable to articulate his feelings, and he fails miserably in socializing with others. The poet uses the metaphor of a cat to present Prufrock. Cat is an animal which is to a certain extent less sociable when compared with a dog. Dog is most often a pet to man. A cat does not socialize with man as the dog does. So men are most often more fond of the dog than the cat. So the comparison of Prufrock with the cat is very apt in this context. Another metaphor used in the poem is that of a crab. The comparison of Prufrock with a crab reveals the other side of Prufrock, that is his egotistic side. And this metaphor is explained in the lines, "I should have been a pair of rugged claws scuttling across the floors of silent sea." The imagery of the silent sea reveals Prufrock's vast mind that wants to remain alone. and escape from the real world. It also points towards the social distance that he has from other people within the society. The imagery in the poem is of different types. There are visual images and auditory images. Color is also used as a technique to explain character as well as ideas. The reference to yellow fog and yellow smoke are examples which refer to the idea of covered eyes. The color yellow is actually a reference to the idea of covered eyes. Yellow can also be a reference to comedy or comic nature, but here it is a reference to covered eyes. Then there are references to the smoke and fog, and these two images are suggestive of hindrances before us. In the case of Prufrock, there are a lot of hindrances that prevent him from moving forward. So the images used by Eliot in this poem help in going deeper into the mind of the narrator. In this case, we find that Prufrock's mind is clouded by negative feelings. His mind is full of fear, he is a coward, and he feels alienated, and he is incapable of making any positive move forward. And I think these images explain these ideas very clearly. Prufrock is a man in his middle ages. He is not at all successful. He feels insecure and has a life which is not at all remarkable. And his insecurity has failed him to grab opportunities or taking risks and prevented him from moving ahead in life. So he is a total failure, and it is that experience that Prufrock narrates through this monologue. The setting of the poem is a big city. It is a big city and a dirty city as well. The action takes place in the evening, and the evening time is again indicative of that blurred kind of atmosphere which does not have the kind of light which is indicative of clarity and the ability to move forward. And here the speaker is very much unhappy. He is confused and he is torn between conflicting thoughts and feelings, and he feels boredom in life. So Prufrock's existence is comparable with the existence of modern man, who is very much bored and who has failed in life and who feels that his life is not at all glorious and there is nothing that is to be remembered in life. There are only two characters appearing in this poem, and the major one is the narrator himself, that is Alfred J. Prufrock. He is very timid and a middle-aged man who considers himself to be a misfit in the society. And the listener is an unidentified companion of Prufrock. We don't know his character, his age, or his social background. He can be anybody. The poem refers to some of the women characters, but there is only indirect references to them. We find that Prufrock wants to make acquaintance with them, but he is very much worried about the kind of reaction that he may receive from them. So because of that fear, he fails in approaching them with his proposal for love. There are references to the lonely men in shirt sleeves and they are characters that are found leaning out of the window, smoking their pipes. So the poem presents some of the experiences of modern life, the sense of alienation, loneliness, and inadequacy, indecision, despair, pessimism, etc. These experiences are common to most of the modern poems, and we find that Eliot is trying to present a common experience that is part of the modern society through Prufrock. Now let us look at the style of the poem. The poem adopts a conversational language combined with the stylized language of poetry. It is a dramatic monologue, and the narration of Prufrock is made in such a way that the reactions of the listener is also taken into consideration. There is variation in the length of the lines and meter, and we find that there is a kind of flow of thought passing through the mind of the Prufrock, and with the same intensity it is presented in the poem. At the same time, the poem shifts from obvious allusions and references to oblique allusions and references. So we can say that it has many levels of meaning, and the poet succeeds in presenting all these levels in a subtle fashion. On the whole, it can be seen that the poem Love Song of Alfred J. Prufrock is a song which depicts absence of love in his life, or it may be a depiction of his inability to love. So the title Love Song itself is highly ironical in this case. To a certain extent, we can say that the poem presents the inner life of the narrator and unravels his psyche, which is characterized by many negative feelings like loneliness, boredom, frustration, insecurity, and fear. So far, we have been looking at the poem Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, considering its significance, the themes, its style, and its relevance. I hope you have got a general idea about the poem, and you can gain more knowledge about that poem by reading the books given in the section for further reading. It will also be interesting to listen to the narration of the poem that is available in YouTube. Thank you.